Good morning. Good to see all of you, your bright faces today. If you're in children's church, you're dismissed at this time, and remember this is our launch of our new classes, so make sure you know where you're going, or ask somebody if you don't. If we see you roaming down the hallways, Going to do a little unconventional opening here today. And perhaps you know there's a football game tonight. Some of you might be planning on watching. And so in honor of that, I've got a question for you. And be a little unconventional because I would like some answers from the audience. And normally you have to sit and listen to me, but I want to hear what you have to say. And even though this is church, the answer is not Jesus. So just so you know, so you don't have to. My question is, what are some qualities of like a championship football, like a bowl-worthy, championship-level football team? What are some qualities that you would expect to see? No, don't be shy. Shout out something for me. Camaraderie. Okay. Teamwork. Okay. Leadership. Dedication. What's that? Fire. All right.
Determination.
Okay. All right. Awesome. You guys passed. Good job. All right. So, see this talking in church is easy. I'm proud of you guys. All right. So just like there's some qualities, some things that you would expect to see in a championship football team. There's some things that you would expect to see. Well, today we're going to look at some qualities of a championship faith. And we're going to look at 3 qualities. And this isn't an exhaustive list. We could come up with a list of 10 or 12 or maybe 20 or more qualities of a championship faith. But what I'm going to do is I brought out 3 things from where we're at in Luke. We're in Luke chapter 7. We've been on this journey through Luke, kind of walking through Luke. Don't have time to see, kind of like a trip. Don't have time to see everything, but you kind of take in a few sights along the way. And that's what we're trying to do through the book of Luke. And so in chapter 7, and I encourage you to, if you have your Bible, to open it up to chapter 7. We're going to be going through a lot of text today. And so it's not going to be up on the screen behind me, just because there's so much of it, and so much of it is narrative. It's a story, and we're going to be reading through. So I encourage you to have it in your lap in front of you. It's not going to be up on the screen. We're going to look at chapter 7 of Luke and see some qualities of a championship faith and what those are. I mentioned when we did our introduction into Luke, I mentioned that one of the characteristics of Luke's writing is that he spends a lot of time talking about, he puts the prominence on non-Jewish people, Gentiles, and on women, and the women's role in Jesus' ministry and the women that he encountered. And you're going to see both of those things in chapter 7. Just kind of a prelude to something to look for. So chapter 7 starts with Jesus has just finished his sermon in chapter 6. So we talked a little bit about it last Sunday. He's preached this sermon out in the wilderness, and he's on his way back into town. He's on his way back into Capernaum. So that's where chapter 7 starts. It says, when Jesus had finished saying all this in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. There a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. The centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, "This man deserves to have you do this, because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue." So Jesus went with them. So we have this centurion. He was an officer in the Roman army. And this was a time of Roman occupation, and so even though this was the Jewish land, the Romans had come in, and a centurion was over at least 100, if not more, soldiers in the Roman army. So he was a prominent officer, a military leader in the Roman army. And although oftentimes the relationship between the Jews and the Romans were pretty rocky and rough, this one apparently was in good rapport, because he was invested in this community that he was in, helped them build their synagogue, their place of religious learning and worship. And so some actual elders, some religious leaders of the town, the local religious leaders, were coming to Jesus on his behalf. So even though he was a Roman centurion, he had earned the respect of these Jewish leaders, and they had sent him to Jesus. I just want to take a little aside, because sometimes people that don't believe in the Bible and try to dissuade us, one of the things they'll use is they'll use the places that it seems like the Bible contradicts itself. Like, well, it says this here, but it says this here, so we can't really trust the Bible because it's saying two different things. So I wanted to kind of point out one of those to you, just real quickly, and then we're going to get on with it. In Matthew chapter 8, we read of the story of a centurion who has a servant who is very sick, and he goes to Jesus and asks Jesus to heal him. But in Matthew's version, the centurion comes himself. And in this version, we have these elders coming on behalf of the centurion. So some people might see that as a discrepancy, as a contradiction, but it's the same story. And this centurion, these elders have come in the centurion's name, just like a president or a king might send an ambassador, and when he goes to the place, a foreign country or whatever, he will say, the king says, the president says, he has the authority to speak on behalf of the person. So the fact that Matthew says the centurion came to Jesus, and Luke says that the centurion sent people to come to Jesus, don't let that dissuade you into thinking the Bible's not reliable. It's the same story. They were going in the name of the centurion. So let's keep going. Starting in verse 6, Jesus went with them. He was not far off from the house when the centurion sent friends to him. Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turning to the crowd, following him, he said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith, even in Israel. Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. The servant was healed. This servant, this centurion, understood how authority works. So he sends a new message to Jesus saying, you don't have to come to my house. You can go about your way, do what you're doing, because I understand that's how authority works. So he had people over him that he was expected to obey. They told him what to do and he did it. But he expected those underneath his authority to obey him, to follow out his orders. He didn't stay up at night hoping his soldiers would follow his orders. He expected it. He assumed they were going to do what he was told. He understood how that authority works. And he believed Jesus had authority. And so it's like, Jesus, you do not need to come and physically heal my servant. You say it's going to be done, and it's going to be done, because that's how authority works. You speak, and it happens. He knew that all Jesus had to do was give the order, and it was done. Only 2 times in the Gospels, this statement, your verse might say that Jesus was amazed, or it might say that Jesus marveled. Only twice in the Gospels do we see that phrase together, that Jesus marveled at something, or he was amazed at something. One is in Matthew chapter 6, where Jesus is marveled at the people's lack of faith. He looks and he's just amazed at their lack of faith. And then the only other time it appears is here in Luke, and he is marveled at this centurion's faith. His faith amazes him that he doesn't even. So Jesus, you don't even have to come. I don't even have to see you. I mean, this was as Jesus' popularity was picking up. Crowds were following him everywhere. They were trying to touch him, have him touch them, and all this. And the centurion's like, no. Just say it. Just say it's going to happen, and I trust it's going to happen. So that's our first quality today of a championship faith, is a championship faith trust in Jesus' authority. That Jesus has authority, and we can just trust in that authority. We can trust that he is in charge. There's nothing outside of his authority, and his life proved that. Jesus has authority over nature. We saw him turn water into wine, walk on water, make a storm stop by the sound of his voice. He proved that he had control over nature. Nature submits to his authority. He has authority over sickness and disease. He made the blind people see and the deaf hear, the lame walk. He healed people. He has authority over sicknesses and disease, and he had authority over sin. One of the things that got Jesus in trouble with the religious leaders is he would go around claiming your sins are forgiven. And who but God can forgive sins? And that's exactly the point. And that's what got him killed, because he was claiming to be God and have the authority to forgive sin. And he had authority over death. In this next passage in Luke, he raises a widow's son from the dead. We know about Lazarus, God raising him from the dead, and Jesus conquered death himself after the cross. It's his authority over nature and sickness and sin and death. We can trust in Jesus' authority, even when it doesn't feel like he has authority. He does. Sometimes it's easy to look at something going on in our own life and like, Jesus, are you really in control? I'm not feeling it. We trust in Jesus' control. But we can look at the culture we live in, or we can look at our government and be like, God, are you really in control of this? But we can trust in his authority. He is in control. It's going to lead us to our next section. And if you would pick up in Luke 7, verse 18. Verse 17 tells us that the news is spreading throughout. So this is early in his ministry, and he's beginning to get popular. The word is spreading. People are talking about this guy and his teaching, his miracles. And so the word is getting out. And verse 18 starts the section where we start shifting our focus to John the Baptist. Verse 18 says, John the Baptist's disciples, told him about all these things. And calling two of them, he sent them to the Lord to ask, are you the one who was to come, or should we expect someone else? When the men came to Jesus, they said, John the Baptist sent us to you to ask, are you the one who was to come, or should we expect someone else? So wait a minute, isn't this John the Baptist, who back in Luke chapter 3, Jesus comes to be baptized by John, and John says, wait a minute, you should be the one baptizing me. Why should I baptize you? I'm not worthy to baptize you. And Jesus is like, no, this is the way it needs to be done. And so John baptizes Jesus, and then a voice from heaven says, this is my son, who I am well pleased. I mean, that was that John. That was that John that experienced that. And later on, John is with some of his disciples, and Jesus walks by and he says, behold the Lamb of God that takes away the sins of the world. There he is. That is John. And now that John is saying, are you really the Messiah? Or are we still waiting for somebody else? What happened, John? We've got to look outside of this passage to figure out what happened. In Matthew chapter 11 is the same story. The same story of John the Baptist sending people to Jesus, saying, are you really the one, or are we waiting for somebody else? But Matthew gives us one little detail that Luke leaves out. In Matthew 11, verse 2, it says, when John heard in prison what Christ was doing, he sent his disciples to ask him, are you the one who was to come, or should we expect someone else? John is in prison. Here's this one that's supposed to prepare the ways for Jesus. He was going and baptizing people, and people were coming from all over to hear this prophet, John, and his goal, his job, his whole purpose was to prepare people for the Messiah. And he was trying to do his job, and now he's in prison. And we know from Matthew 14 that he's not going to get out of prison with his head attached anyway. So John is sitting in prison wondering what went wrong. I mean, I was doing what God has called me to do. I'm hearing Jesus, and you're doing all this stuff, but do you not know that I'm sitting here in prison? Do you not understand? Are you really the Messiah? What is up? So our second point today is the championship faith knows how to handle doubt. Now, having faith does not mean you will never face doubts. I'm going to say that again because it sounds like faith and doubt we think of as opposites, and they are, but having faith doesn't mean you'll never face doubt, that you'll never get discouraged or get tempted to lose heart. Here's Here it is, John the Baptist and his tremendous ministry preparing people for Jesus, and now he's having doubts. Are you really the Messiah? Or are we still waiting for somebody else? So the trick, the key to having a championship faith is not to never doubt, it's how to handle the doubts when they come. It's how we handle our doubts, because we're going to have doubts at times. And so 2 things we can get from this passage. The first thing is to do exactly what John did. He took his doubts to Jesus. He couldn't go himself because he was in prison, but he sent people to Jesus. And notice Jesus' response. He's not disgusted. He is not disappointed. He's like, no, John, thought he knew better than that. Why would you even ask? Jesus doesn't reprimand or turn away in disgust. And he won't do this with our doubts either. We take our doubts to Jesus. We don't understand what he's doing in a certain situation. We don't understand why things are happening the way they are. He wants to hear those doubts. We can go to him. We can take our doubts to him. They don't intimidate him. They don't scare him. They don't turn him away. He won't turn us away. So just like John's, I'm going to go to Jesus and find out. That's what we do with our doubts. Take your doubts to Jesus like John did. And then when Jesus' response to John is found in verse 22, he replies to these messengers, go back and report to John what you have seen and heard. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cured, and the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is preached to the poor. Blessed is the man who does not fall away on account of me. So go back and tell John the things you have seen and you've heard. Report what is happening. Blind people see all the healing, all the miracles, all the preaching that you're hearing. Go back and report yourself the evidence. What have you seen me do? What have you seen Jesus do? So second way we handle our doubts with a championship faith, we take them to Jesus and then we look at the evidence. We look and see, what has Jesus done? What is he doing? One way you can do that is by reading your Bible and seeing what he has done in the past, and see these people these imperfect people, these people that had doubts, they had fears, they made mistakes, they screwed things up, but God still worked his story through this book. And we can look at that book and we look at their lives and see what God is doing and realize he's still in authority. And he is who he says he is. We can look at the evidence found in God's Word. We can look at if you're a reader, you could read biographies of men of the faith that have gone on in our past, and the great ways God has used missionaries and evangelists and ordinary people, and just used them and the things they've done. And if you're not a reader, you can listen to a podcast or find a documentary on Netflix of these people of the faith that really lived out their faith in the midst of doubt. Another big thing we can do to help our doubts is to have some kind of journal. Whether it's just you're recording your prayer requests down, or if you're actually journaling some thoughts and feelings, what you did, just having some kind of account of your life. Because a lot of times we miss God working because we don't take the time to just reflect on what he's doing. And so when we force ourselves to slow down enough, to write things down, to journal, to have some kind of account of what's going on in our lives, we can look back and see how faithful God has been. But if we just live life at the pace we often live it, and we never slow down, we never look back, we never reflect, then it's easy to doubt what he's even doing. So championship faith knows how to handle doubt. We're going to look at the last section of Luke, starting at verse 36. Now one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to have dinner with him. So he went to the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. When a woman who had lived a sinful life in that town learned that Jesus was eating at the Pharisee's house, she brought an alabaster jar of perfume, and as she stood behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and she wiped them with her hair, kissed them, and poured perfume on them. When the Pharisee who had invited him saw this, he said to himself, if this man were a prophet, if he were a prophet, he would know who is touching him and what kind of woman she is, that she is a sinner. Jesus answered him, Simon, I have something to tell you. Tell me, teacher, he said. 2 men owed money to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. Neither of them had the money to pay him back, so he canceled the debts of both. Now, which one of them will love him more? Simon replied, I suppose that the one who had a bigger debt canceled. You have judged correctly, Jesus said. And then he turned to the woman and said to Simon, do you see this woman? I came into your house. You did not give me any water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not give me a kiss, but this woman, from the time I entered, has not stopped kissing my feet. You did not put oil on my head, but she has poured perfume on my feet. Therefore I tell you, her many sins have been forgiven, for she loved much. But he who has been forgiven little loves little. Jesus said to her, your sins are forgiven. The other guests began to say among themselves, who is this who even forgives sins? Jesus said to the woman, your faith has saved you. Go in peace. There's a lot there in that story we can draw from. You have the idea of, the judgmental religious person looking down at a sinner. The reason why she was labeled a sinner is because her sins were public. I mean, don't we do that? Like the people that have the sins that are easy to see, they've either been exposed publicly or their sins are out there for everybody to see. Those are the sinners in our minds. But the rest of us just have those sins that are easier to hide. We're all sinners. But this woman's sin was a public thing. There's a lot of stuff we can pull from this verse, but what I want to for today to pull out of here is her gift. This woman, she risks judgment. She risks embarrassment. She puts herself out there. She comes to this house with this Pharisee because Jesus is there. And she has this expensive bottle of perfume. Perfume is expensive. Newsflash, I don't know if you need me to tell you that or not. But Tabitha's favorite perfume is white diamonds. And so here's how white diamonds fits into the Drum family budget. Okay, giving you a little secret. Okay, so around Christmas time, there's these different perfume, these little gift boxes. I'm sure you've seen them. A couple different bottles, maybe a lotion or whatever, and they put them in this little gift box for Christmas, so you can buy the perfume, and it's a nice little box already. It's a gift box for Christmas. Mrs. Drum doesn't get that gift box for Christmas. All right, but what we do is I drag myself out of bed December 26th. Because those boxes, they're Christmas boxes. Christmas is over. So if you get there in time, these boxes of these Christmas gift boxes of perfume are like half off. And so that's how the Drum family gets our perfume. So you can take that if you want to and run with it. But the perfume is expensive, and experts say for this woman it may have been even more expensive than what we have to deal with. It could have been represented a year's worth of wages for her. And she brings it and anoints Jesus with it. It's an act of love and surrender and sacrifice. A championship faith gives generously. Because we have this faith in this God, in His authority, in His love for us, in His mercy and grace as He's forgiven us, and we want to give back. And we trust, that's where the faith comes in, that we can never outgive God. No matter what we give, He's always going to bless us more. We can never outgive God. Never outgive God. When I was growing up, this is not any disrespect to my parents, but I love my parents. They were, my dad was he wasn't a Christian until I was 16, and so all the time growing up, he wasn't a good man, just church wasn't a part of his life, and if they're listening on YouTube, I love you guys, all right, so he was either not a Christian or a young Christian as I was growing up, and so my experience when the offering plate was passed is, it would pass, and Dad would whatever, open up the wallet, whatever was convenient in there, if it was a 5, if it was a 10, whatever it was, he would just take it out and put it in the plate and pass it on, and that's kind of what was modeled for me. And it wasn't until college that I even heard of the idea of a tithe. I never even knew what it was. It wasn't preached in my church, or if it was, I was a kid and didn't care, didn't listen, and it wasn't really necessarily modeled by my parents. And so it wasn't until college that I heard about it and got convicted by this idea. And if you don't know, tithe is a word from the Old Testament. It just means a tenth. And the idea is that you trust in God and you give back to Him that first fruit. For them in a farming culture, they would give back the first tenth of their harvest, just as a sign that God was going to take care of them, and they would give up a tenth. And this is not a preacher asking for money, but I just want to tell, this is just my story. Is since college, I decided that's what I would do. And I would give 10% to God, even if I didn't know if the 90% was going to cover the bills or not. And never look back, never regretted it. God has always taken care of us. And He does that when we are committed to Him and we give to Him. So when faith gives generous, then I encourage you to consider that. And if there's nothing magic about 10, and if you can start with 5, if you can start with something that you determine to give, and it's premeditated, and it's intentional. Again, you give generously. But we can also give of our time generously. We're starting to staff a nursery, so we say hello in the camera to the nursery people back there, watching our kids so that the parents can come in here and get fed and worship without that. We have kids giving up their time in the children's church so that not only can we invest in our children, which is so important, but then it allows us to be in here also. But we need, that takes people giving up their time. Nick mentioned this nursing home service that I'm excited that we had this opportunity once a month to go in and just share with those people, those people that have lived the faith long before us. And now they're in a nursing home situation and looking for a chance to worship God. And we can be a part of that, but we need some help. When we start that, I don't want it to just be like one person going over there. I want it to feel like Zoah is coming to Hampton Oaks on that Sunday. And not all 90 of us, but that we would be well represented and feel like that's an extension of our service. We need people to help prepare communion. There's all kinds of different ways you can give your time here as an extension of your faith. So I just want to close, kind of wrap things up. The classic closing, right? Tell them where you've been. So we've talked about championship faith. About championship faith trusts Jesus' authority. No matter what's going on now, I promise you, it didn't come as a surprise to Jesus. He's still an authority over it, even if it doesn't feel like it. And a championship faith knows how to handle doubts. We're going to have doubts at times. We're not going to understand what He's doing. But we take those doubts to Him, and we keep our eyes open to what He's doing in our lives. And then we give back. Because there's an action involved in faith. It's not really faith if it just stays in here. But we give, we do, we act out our faith. Here in this building, and the things we can do here, and out there in our community, and the things we can do out there. To put our faith in action. Let's pray. Father God, it's my goal that we could have a champion faith. That no matter what the world throws at us, our faith will stand the test. persevere through any doubts, any struggles, and any fears we may have, that our faith would stand firm. This church family would be a rock in this community, a rock of faith that people can come to and shelter under, and that we can go out to and reach and share as an extension of our faith, your message to the world. Send us out today. Ask people of faith, your children, your son's name. Amen. You stand there. I don't always say this out loud, but praise team, I appreciate all you guys do for us. Thank you so much for what you have done today. Thank you all for being here. And those in the back that can't hear, make sure to thank. You're picking up your kids today. Thank them for the time that they're giving. And let me pray as you guys. Father God, thank you so much for your love, for your grace, for being our God, a God we can trust, a God we can have faith in. You'll never disappoint us. We can never outgive you. You're big enough for everything we face. I pray for this church as we leave these walls and go out and be your church at work or at school, in our houses as we are the church in those places. Use us. In your Son's name.